The views and opinions expressed on this show belong solely to the hosts and their guests and do not reflect the views of any on-site institutions unless explicitly stated.
What's up, everybody? My name is Steve Vanderwall.
And I'm Justin Klosser.
And we're your hosts of Cannabis Cum Laude, a podcast devoted entirely to cannabis. We're going to talk cultivation, business, medicine, politics, culture, advocacy, and everything in between.
The cannabis industry is complicated. It's robust. It has a lot of moving parts. And it's our job to help you understand it just a little bit better. So tune in every week for a brand new episode. And if you have a question that you'd like answered on the show, send it on over to questions@cannabiscumlaude.com. Thanks. Enjoy the show.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to part 2 of this episode of Cannabis Cum Laude. Steve and Justin here, and we're here with Shawn Gold, CEO of Pilgrim Soul. And this week we're talking creativity in cannabis, one of my favorite topics. And this time this part of the episode, we're going to really dive into more product stuff. So if you wouldn't mind, kind of give us a brief, or kind of a high-level view of what's inside the journal, maybe some of the content that you've included. Are there tools for helping generate ideas? Have you organized it in a certain way? Kind of break down the layout of the journal, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. So the journal is about 50 different exercises that are, meant to help you see the world in a different way, challenge, the way you see things, avoid judgment, tap into areas of your brain that you don't normally use, and really kind of empathize with different perspectives. It's all about sort of growing and challenging perspective. It's organized into 4 different categories: creative imagination, creative reflection, creative awareness, and creative focus. So creative imagination is about divergent thinking, which is sort of just ideation without judgment, no holds barred, maybe silly ideas. Creative awareness is riffing on the world around you. So, using nature and people, and maybe going into a coffee shop and one of the exercises is like going into a coffee shop and writing a field guide, like an animal field guide, but using the people. Like, what are their habits? What are their natural environments? And sort of it's kind of a silly thing, but you're sort of doing an empathy exercise. Creative focus is balancing logic and creativity, kind of how we use creativity at work, where we're sort of putting new ideas together based on previous existing information. And creative reflection is about exercises that help you look inside yourself to find creativity. And there's a book called The Artist's Way that is very much all about this. It's about, how you think and how you feel and what your childhood was like, and, all these different emotive things based on, your history, to help you, come up with more creative ideas. So it's broken down into and then there's sections of the book that talk about cannabis and creativity, talk about dosage. It's really important. Cannabis research shows that using cannabis to create for creativity is more about enhancing the experience than being the experience itself. So low dosage is generally preferred for more consistent results. Sometimes I overdose, or I overdose, not exactly overdose. Maybe that's not the best word, but I smoke more than I really want to. And I'm, I know that I have to kind of like catch the wave. I will drink some water, do some breathing, and 100% of the time I usually catch the wave and have like a creative session. But again, the best results are when I'm just doing 1 or 2 hits and I'm sort of, able to still be kind of in touch with everything else. So those are the journals. There's a bunch of different exercises. My career has been in building companies that previously didn't exist, whether it's social networking like MySpace or blogs, or fashion, subscription commerce. Everything I've done is about pretty much creating something new. So I've read almost every ideation, innovation, creativity book that's out there, and for the most part, they're pretty dry, they're long-winded, they're not fun to use. So in creating this Pilgrim Soul journal, I really created the one that I wanted to use, where it was using all the techniques that all these famous ideation and creativity books do, but I just made it a lot more fun and silly. And we give you an exercise to do, which sometimes they're inane. Like one of them is in the creative focus section is you're your kid's peewee basketball coach and you're up 10 points at the half, but you bet heavily against them. Write a halftime speech that allows your team to, lose with dignity while you trash yours. So it's kind of a silly exercise. Like who would ever be that person? Obviously, most people who would buy this journal are not that awful, but it allows you to, it's about storytelling and manipulation and empathy. You have to empathize with the kids, empathize with their parents. So and we tell you how this helps with creativity, but it's kind of funny and ridiculous. And a lot of these things in the journal, I find many people are doing it with friends. During the height of COVID, they were doing it over Zoom. A lot of boyfriends, girlfriends, husbands, and wives are making an exercise out of this, where they're doing the exercise together. And you learn a lot about people from some of these exercises when you're like, that's how you think. Like that was your path from this word to that word. There's like one of the exercises is there's two words that are seemingly unrelated, like hot sauce and senator. And then you have to put four or five words that make a bridge from hot sauce to senator. And, I do this with my wife, and I'm like, that's how you got, that's how your mind works.
Yeah.
So it's really funny to see how people think when you're doing this with someone else.
It sounds a little bit scary. I don't know if I would venture down that endeavor with my fiance or not, but maybe. One of the exercises that I really liked, it really kind of made me think hard and long, really, about my relationship and kind of brought about a better appreciation for it, was the abstract analogies. And the specific one is being in a relationship is like, and then it's got a bunch of different activities like cleaning the bathroom, playing poker, going on holiday, and you have to try and draw the parallel of how those are similar, right? And you end up seeing some patterns form in your way of thinking, right? And so like how you're drawing these analogies between the different activities. And I just thought that was really cool and wanted to kind of highlight like one of the ones that I personally was enjoying.
And so being in a relationship is like, cleaning the bathroom, going to the beach, and people have to and it's generally they're harder, they're unrelated. I mean, you eventually make them related, but it's a classic exercise in challenging perspective and making you kind of think outside your normal patterns of thinking. But that technique you could also use for any ideation process. You could, selling cannabis or CBD oil is like going to the beach. It's like you can kind of, a lot of these techniques that are in the book are classic techniques. So you can certainly have fun with the journal, but you should also learn how to use these techniques in applying to your job or
moving forward, just with your thinking process.
Yeah, totally.
So I also wanted to touch on, you brought up that low dosage is going to be typically more consistent results. And we talked about that. I believe, I don't remember if it was with Cody or with Dr. Rosenthal. I think it was with Dr. Ed Rosenthal.
No. Ethan Russo.
Oh my gosh.
Ed Rosenthal,
yeah,
also a legend, but Ethan Russo.
ER. I'm so sorry. I just completely slipped of the tongue there.
But
sorry,
if you're listening, we'd like to have you on the show.
Yes. Yeah. And Dr. Russo, I apologize for the slip up. Anyway, Dr. Russo was telling us how that is called a biphasic effect, right? And what we see with that, and THC has that, and what you see with THC frequently is that its concentration is highly varied amongst cultivars, right? And so what the point that you reach that biphasic effect is going to vary across the cultivars. And so if you're thinking, 2-3 bowls is what I need to get to my creative space, well, that's going to be vastly different across different cultivars, as opposed to, well, maybe 1 or 2 hits where an 18% to 22% is going to give you a pretty similar dosage. And I just kind of wanted to elaborate on that.
It's funny that you said that, because before we hopped on the show, we were talking about this cultivar. We have a Mimosa strain in studio right now, and Mimosa is a cross between the Clementine cultivar, and Purple Passion. And Clementine is a very tangy, uplifting sativa terpene, while Purple Punch is a classic indica. It's got those fruity notes. It's heavy, usually 26 to 28%, and it's more, more of a body, or more of a sedative. Yeah. But, and I've noticed this too, if you smoke the Mimosa in low dose, 1 or 2 hits, you get that more creative, that more uplifting sativa, but a bowl or 2 is where that Purple Punch kicks in. So it's definitely, I think you see a lot of those biphasic results, like you said, about, cultivar specific. So if you're bred with a sativa, you have a hybrid, where in that, how are those each individual cultivars going to express and affect your experience? It's really interesting.
Yeah. And we talk, and everybody's, biochemistry is different. Some people can smoke a sativa and go to sleep. So it's really about finding what works for you. There are some macro trends, when you look at effects on leafly, it's a pretty good guide. It's based on survey data. So it's macro, and most people think this is creative, or most people think this is relaxing. But really, and you'll probably, if you use that as a guide, you'll probably end up where you need to go. But the general idea is to take it low and slow if you're, not an experienced cannabis smoker. And as you said, you can smoke a Jack Herrera strain and, and get another flower from a different cultivar and have a slightly different experience. Totally. And, it may or may not be exactly Jack Herrera. So,
I think it seems to me where, cannabis is often kind of broken up into 2 categories, right? The recreational adult use and medical. But it sounds like, where you come from Pilgrim Soul, and this is something that I believe in as well, is that cannabis really belongs in the wellness industry, right? Kind of that hybrid where things like, just daily, life optimization, whatever that is. And I think whether that's enhancing creativity or improving sleep or appetite or whatever, your daily wellness and your daily health, where, in my opinion, is where cannabis is most influential. Now, you also have a line of live rosin products, which I think live resin products, which are some of the cream of the crop products. When choosing these products or cultivars, how are you designing these products, and what was the end goal? For your consumers, what were you hoping to accomplish when they consume these products, and what went into formulating them?
Totally. So, the ultimate goal. So the different blends that I have, I blend multiple strains together for a specific effect, and they're slightly nuanced because they correspond with the chapters of the journal: creative awareness, creative imagination, creative focus, creative reflection. To find these blends, I work with this company called Abstract Labs out of Irvine, like a bunch of PhDs in analytical chemistry. They actually live by the beach. They're the kind of surfer scientists, cannabis users, perfect scenario. And we analyzed over 100 different strains that index high for creativity based on, again, survey data from Leafly and a bunch of other sites. We looked at, we bought the flower, we made 3D, we analyzed, we made 3D models of the cannabinoid and terpene profiles in the flower, and we mapped those back to primary, secondary, and tertiary states of mind, like creativity and focus, creativity and euphoria, creativity and relaxation. So the creative reflection blend has a little bit more myrcene in it. It's the only one that kind of has indica leaning properties to it, because it's about relaxation and kind of looking inside yourself. So we made sort of a matrix of these that we can mix different strains together, like creative. This is the Creative Focus blend. This one is Wookie Fruit, XJ13, and Lemon Jack. And so those are the ones that we kind of saw really led to help, optimize focus. Creative awareness is this, and these change based on supply chain. You can swap out different strains as long as they kind of fit into the matrix we built. This one is Dread Bread, Green Crack, and Super Lemon Haze.
Which one was that?
There's Creative Awareness.
It sounds like awareness.
Jack Herrera and anything lemon. Yeah, you're aware.
Yeah, totally.
And Green Crack.
Creative Imagination is the Soap, Chem Dog, and Lemon Jack. I mean, it's like, as a cannabis, smoker who loves strains, these just get me very excited. And then Creative Awareness is Blue Dream and Pineapple Express.
Okay.
So, and then, then there's feedback. I'm doing a new round right now. We made some estimates. We've, blended a bunch of stuff together, and then I give it to a bunch of different people who are like creative directors of different companies, artists, writers, and I'll give them a flight of different product and have them rank them and give feedback. And then, we move on from there. Because like, as you said, yeah, it's the right strains and they fit into our profile, but this flower may be different from another flower. Sure. This Chem Dog flower may be different from another flower. Let's make sure that it's still working. So we do, we have our matrix, but then we also test it against human beings to come up with, each round of product that we make.
Absolutely. What is so live resin implies that they are solvent extracted. Was curious what the modality of extraction was.
Yeah, so it's a CO2 extraction. We use
shaken
flash frozen cannabis, basically taking the cannabis, freezing it as soon as you pick it. Then we make an ice hash from that, and then use the CO2 extraction from there. And it's interesting. I was at if a live resin should be like 65 to maybe 80 on the high side percent THC. And that's pretty high. Like, I'm seeing these live resins in stores that are like 90%, like it just can't be live resin. I think I think that some of that has to do a little bit with, and I'm not pointing any fingers, and I'm sure that there is a million labs out there that are doing it properly. But I think some of it has to do with labs wanting repeat business. Testing maybe
labs.
Labs wanting repeat. People are mixing distillate with their live resin, and
okay.
There's things like that happening.
Yeah.
Like, when I see that, I'm like, this is not. I was just in a dispensary yesterday, and I was like, this can't be live resin. It just doesn't work that way. If you really do a pure live resin product, you're not going to get that much THC. But you don't need that much THC. I mean, it's not. No. Like the high, as you know, like you can smoke a 90%, THC vape and get less high than smoking a 20% flower.
Yep.
And it's really about the entourage effect and how it all works together.
Full spectrum.
Yep.
Right. Full spectrum.
We almost called this podcast Full Spectrum Radio, and then we found out that it was already taken.
Yeah, so it's like, in the best case scenario, you should let nature, do as it intended. The only oil we really would do, I love a rosin. It's hard to scale. I like that's a more full spectrum than a live resin, but it's really hard to scale. So live resin is kind of like the best scalable oil that has the widest spectrum, for this particular product. And then we'll probably go to live resin. We're researching right now live resin edibles next to see, but how the body sort of absorbs THC through the liver and these other cannabinoids and terpenes through the liver is very different than it does through the lung. So we're still in the research process to see if we can get the same effects.
Yeah, they might have to be more reflection branded edibles.
Yeah, I've always wondered to what extent how terpenes affect the cannabis experience when they go through the gut compared to when they go through the lungs. We know that THC, metabolizes to 11-hydroxy, but terpenes being volatile and more aromatic molecules, it's the foundation of aromatherapy. Do they have the same effect, or are they metabolized into something else when they go through your gut? Because, ideally it'd be like, oh, this is a Jack Herrera brownie. If I eat this, I'm going to have a more uplifting, creative, euphoric experience. But I don't necessarily know, and I'm not a biochemist by any means. Do you know how terpenes interact through the gut compared to when they're inhaled?
I can't speak to it with any expertise. I just know it's a it's a different experience. It's a different high absorbing it through the gut.
Sure.
It's going, you have it's going through the mouth, it's going in your saliva glands. So there's also that's happening. But I could potentially sound like an idiot if I started to discourse on that. If you have,
Fair enough.
So I'm going to avoid talking about it.
I'm going to risk sounding like an idiot for a second. So follow my train of thought here. Doesn't it feel like you would lose most of those during the decarboxylation process? Not that, and like you said, I'm also not a biochemist, so I'm sure there's still some level of substance that stays behind as that's volatilizing into the air. But I would imagine that a lot of those are getting
there's a way around it.
Off-gassed.
We do a 2-part extraction, so we'll pull terps right out of the biomass before we decarb, and then we'll decarb, and then we'll extract, and then you homogenize at the end. So there's still a heating element to when you homogenize, because it's like syrupy. It's very thick, and it won't just, so you got to add some heat and your carrier oil, whatever it is. But I do think that there are ways that you can adjust pressure and temperature and kind of, your extraction processes where you can preserve the majority of the terpenes. But if you just do a straight extraction and decarb it, I mean, that's why edibles stink so much when you make them in your house, because that's all the terpene volatilizing in the air. So if you do take a more sophisticated approach to extraction, you definitely can preserve at least the majority of the terpenes.
And I'm sure some of them are a little more stable too and hang out.
Sure.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Sorry, Shawn.
No problem. I mean, I'm here to learn. There's some things I know and some things I do not. That's part of being a human being, part of being an entrepreneur, for sure.
Yeah. That's everybody. And I might sound like a broken record when I say this, but I feel like people really need to hear it this much, so I'm going to keep saying it. The minute you say that you know everything in this industry, you are done in this industry, right? Because this industry isn't even halfway explored, let alone understood to its extent. Not only that, it's ever evolving. I mean, look at how rapidly things went from having some flour and some butane blasted through a glass pipe to where extractions and everything are now. And that was just a matter of a few years after California and Colorado going legal. It's wild. Nobody's ever going to be an expert. There's always new methods coming out to grow, new styles and products and research that's coming out that's contrary to some of what we thought in the past, and some of it is supportive, right? And do you know what? Maybe that research isn't right either. That's why we need repeatable studies. But my whole point is, in life even, not just this industry, you should always be learning. You never know it all. There's always something that you can learn from every interaction that you have.
Yeah, we are routinely humbled on this podcast. We, Justin, and we definitely have our strengths, and we'll have these people on here, and it's just like, holy cow, I feel like I know nothing, talking to some of these bigger cultivators or some of these medical professionals or lawyers, whatever, you think you have a grasp on. And that's kind of the beauty, because you can learn every single day by talking to somebody in this industry. There's tons and tons of really good resources. But what I've noticed a lot in this industry is, a lot of other industries, people tend to keep that knowledge close to their chest, right? It's IP. Here, I've noticed, and maybe it's just kind of that thing with cannabis and empathy and understanding, but people tend to be very open to sharing some of their, their recipes and their IP and their growing techniques, and in an industry that's nascent and emerging right now. That's the key to growth. It's educating people, destigmatizing, and sharing the knowledge. And it seems to really be prevalent in cannabis.
There is a co-opetition vibe in cannabis for sure.
Yeah.
And in part there needs to be, because all boats rise with the tide, especially now. If people are making big mistakes that are high profile, it sets the whole industry back.
Well, and we're not there federally yet, right? So we're not done with the fight. Like, just because we in New York legalized doesn't mean we can just doesn't mean we can all of a sudden just start going crazy and doing all this wild stuff. Because guess what? Then the federal government is going to start looking at this thing harder, and it might start pushing it in the opposite direction. We could potentially hurt things for other states. You know what I mean? And same with other states that have legalized, not just New York. I'm just using that as an example. And to speak to you talking about being humbled on the show, I felt like I had to like pull myself out of the classroom for a minute in part 1 of this episode when we were talking about marketing, because I'm like in my head, like, make sure you sink this stuff into memory, right? So if you missed part 1 about like marketing and creativity in the cannabis space, definitely go back and check that out, because that sir was absolutely. I was soaking that up, like, okay, do this, do that, do that.
Yeah, it's you look at I think everybody can be creative, but I think creatives are born, not necessarily bred. To be able to have someone like yourself who is very clearly an innovator and a visionary, it's they're few and far between. It is a rarity to have somebody like you to be able to have an open conversation and to really talk creativity and stuff like that at these very deep levels. So I know it's personally one of my favorite topics of conversation. I think a lot of us have some similar mentors, and we're always trying to how do you optimize, how do you create yourself as a machine for creativity? It's tough, but with these mind hacks and with following mentors and reading the right books and learning how to live outside that box and leveraging tools like cannabis, creativity can be a process. It can be a system, and it doesn't have to be random. So I'll get off my soapbox, but I just wanted to say thank you for sharing everything.
Yes, thank you so much.
That I really value.
Yeah, I mean, to that, and something you just said, I mean, we're all born creative. This Pilgrim Soul brand is not so much as about teaching people to be creative. It's more about unlearning the things that made you not creative. Like, there's a famous study by a guy named George Land in the 1960s, who was hired by NASA to identify their most creative scientists to put them on innovation projects. So he created this test for divergent thinking, ideation, and he gave the same test to 2,500 kindergartners. And 95% of these 5-year-olds tested expert level creative. He tested the same group 5 years later in the 6th grade, and 30% of them were expert level creative. By the time they were 15, 5% of them were expert level creative. So it's, again, we're born creative, but we have, we're taught that mistakes are bad. Mm-hmm. And very often mistakes are the creativity, that artists don't make any money. We're standardized tests, and
they got Common Core out.
Lack of sleep for adults and all these things that really stress creativity out of us. So the number 1 TED Talk of all time, which is awesome, is by Sir Kenneth Robinson, called How Schools Have Killed Creativity, and We Desperately Need to Bring It Back. Yeah. It's a great listen, but he talks a lot about this kind of stuff, where it's not and that's what the journal is for. The Pilgrim Soul Journal is for helping people kind of unlearn a lot of these things that, that made them go from kindergarten to 6th grade and not be creative.
Well, Shawn, we're coming up to the end of the episode. Thank you so much for hopping on today and sharing your knowledge and sharing your story. Where can people find you?
You can reach me direct at info@pilgrimsoul.com, or on Shawn Gold on LinkedIn, or if you send anything, on our website, it usually gets to me, pilgrimsoul.com. Also
pilgrimsoulcannabis.com as well.
pilgrimsoulcannabis.com, Pilgrim Soul Creative on Instagram.
Okay.
So any of those places, and I'm usually ends up in front of me.
Is there anything that you'd like to plug? Anything new that you're working on? Anything that's going to be released? Anything? Here's your the show's yours. Anything you'd like to plug?
Well, I mean, if anybody's interested in the journal or any of the products we have, pilgrimsoul.com, you can find them. We're coming out with a bunch of all our cannabis products are California based because that's where we are. Coming out with a bunch of different, new products over the next couple of months. They're in MedMen, they're in a lot of the top cannabis dispensaries now. So nothing. I have some stuff I can't talk about until October when it comes out, but I have a collaboration with a globally known celebrity on the next journal that we did together. Completely new content.
Cool.
He's a comedian, so it's kind of funny, but a lot of the same interesting techniques.
Cool. You'll have to follow up with us when it's launched, and maybe we can do a quick repeat episode and see how everything's going.
I'll send you guys copies of it.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
And we'll push it and share it, obviously. So, again, thank you so much for sharing your time and your knowledge. I hope we can do it again soon. Good luck on the launch of the new journal. Justin, anything?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you as well, Shawn. It has been a pleasure. I apologize for the mix-up that we had as far as scheduling goes, but I appreciate you kind of jumping on here last minute and really knocking it out of the park for us.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Really awesome to be on the show. And I have a feeling that the scheduling conflict was my fault. But nonetheless, we made it happen.
We made it happen and recorded a great episode. I mean, it's funny how things work out.
Pulled right through. So with that, listeners, hit the Patreon, hit the Discord, and don't forget to elevate your state of mind.
See you next week. Thanks to our friends here at Rockbox Recording and Production in Rochester, New York. They are a full professional podcast and video studio designed by a radio guy for podcasters. Audio, video, voiceovers, editing, whatever. Mouth off at Rockbox at rockbox.com.
You can follow Cannabis Cum Laude on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Cannabuzz. Type Cannabis Cum Laude into your search bar and you should be able to find us, but the links will also be posted in the episode notes as well. If you want to help support the show, head on over to Patreon, and that will ensure that we're able to keep the best quality sound and video coming to you on a regular basis. And if you liked what you heard today, please don't forget to rate and review the show.